series of talks, we discussed a little about Ma Sarada Devi. So naturally, the next one would be Swami Vivekananda. But Swami Vivekananda's life is so much eventful and so much full of dramatic things that we may have to cut it into two. That means in two sessions. Otherwise, we will not be able to do justice to this highly eventful life. With these things, we begin. Viveka jnananda nimagna chittam, viveka danaika vinoda shilam, viveka bhasa kamaniya kantim, Jasau viveki tamahang namami. Now, to understand the background in which Vivekananda's advent took place, we have to remember a few things. First of all, he came at a time in the city of Calcutta, which was then the capital of India and the most anglicized city of India, where the Brahmo movement, the reform movement, which is called Brahmo movement, was in full operation. And these Brahmos were, you see, ever-growing reproval of Hinduism. That was the norm in those days. And from the West, agnostic ideas, along with the Christ myth theory, this was also, the waves of this were breaking up on Indian shores. And the effect was that atheism, agnosticism, skepticism became a very normal mode of thinking, especially among the graduates of the university in Calcutta. So, and then along with that, the agnostic philosophers of the West, like your John Stuart Mill, whose essays were published, the 3 essays on religion are published when Naren was only a child, and Darwin's theory, because Darwin's theory, see, it shattered the standard idea of, in the theological circles about the descent of man. So the whole effect was that there was big questioning about religion itself, religion, God, soul, etc. Big question. So in the middle of that, you see, that was one thing. But there is another thing which was going on, on the mystical side. This is the social side, these movements. The mystical side, say, in the late 50s of 19th century, when Sri Ramakrishna was, already a God intoxicated man, he got intimation from the Divine Mother that pure souls would come to him. So he became very much anxious to meet these pure souls, and he used to climb to the roof of the building in the Dakshineshwar temple premises, which is called the Kutiwari. That means where the proprietors, etc., used to come and stay, and where even Sri Ramakrishna passed 14 years of his life in this building before shifting to his place near the temple. So he used to climb to the roof of this your Kutibari during dusk, when all the bells and music was there in that din and bustle. He used to shout. You see, it was a shouting prayer. That means, we say, where are you, these pure souls? Please come to me, etc. So, in fact, you see, when Naren was born, you find its trace in the Kathamrita itself. When Naren was born, he intimated Sri Ramakrishna that I have come. That is what Sri Ramakrishna told Naren, that after your birth you came to me and declared that I have come. But Naren says that I didn't know anything. I was just sleeping as a baby in Calcutta. So this was happening. That means, you see, and Sri Ramakrishna later on said that he has been brought here from the sphere of the seven sages, Saptarshi Mandala. So from the sphere of the seven sages he came. So this is the mystic side of it before his birth. And his birth was, you see, also as a consequence of the prayers of his mother through one of the relatives at Bireshwar temple of Benares. So his life had to do something with Shiva, because in 1898 he would get the boon from Shiva, the boon of choosing his hour of death. So there must be something, you see, connected really about Shiva in his life. So now, so in the when he your first as an adolescent, we find Naren that he was gathering Western thoughts principally. He was, you see, and then he came a little to Eastern thoughts. So he was gathering these thoughts, you see, and then also at the same time approaching the religious leaders of Calcutta. Calcutta was full of religious movements. He used to go to this, especially he went to these Brahma leaders, including the senior Tagore, Maharshi Devendranath, the father of the celebrated poet. Once he entered into his houseboat, where he was meditating, Tagore was meditating, and asked him, "Sir, have you seen God?" Devendranath opened his eyes, saw this young boy, and replied that you have the eyes of a yogi, you will see God. Naren was not happy because he did not get his answer. So then, by chance, he met in November 1881 Sri Ramakrishna in a neighbor's house where he was invited to sing a song. So after the room was almost empty, the visitors had left. In his own words, he crawled to this man. He was thinking, can this man be a great teacher? He does not speak language of the cultivated people. He talks like a villager. Uh, and he has no, you see, outward charm, nothing, you see. So can this man be a great teacher? So he asked him, sir, do you believe in God? He said, yes. Ramakrishna said, yes. So Naren again asked, what is the proof? Ramakrishna replied that I see him clearly as I see you, only more intensely. See, then Naren did not know what to say. It's the first time in his life he is hearing that a man is claiming that he has seen God. So he didn't know and began to scan and fathom this man, whether he was just a madman or charlatan. What is it? You see, he was doing that. In doing that, he was gradually being transformed by his guru, who was very powerful, you see. He tried to, you see, Ramakrishna knew by his yogic intuition that Naren was in his previous existence a follower of the impersonal God, this Brahman. So he tried to induce a nirvikalpa samadhi in him by his touch, which Naren could not take, you see. I say, he cried out, what are you doing to me? I have parents at home. He thought that this man was trying to kill him by some mysterious method. So Ramakrishna assured him by touching him again that we need not be in a hurry. All these things will come in time. And these things will come in time almost 50 months later, assuming that at the end of January 1886, he got this highest kind of samadhi, the nirvikalpa samadhi. Now, this nirvikalpa samadhi convinced him about the Vedantic statement, Aham Brahmasmi. I am Brahman, that means my essence. The essence of my being is Brahman. He was convinced about it. Convinced means it is not an intellectual understanding. It is a kind of thing, that means it is a kind of understanding which leaves no trace of doubt. You see, this because this is an experience. This is not your a cerebral thing. It is not studying and understanding. It is coming face to face with a reality. So, and because of this thing, he was already in practically in in monastic life already, 1886, because 2nd January 1886, the day after Kalpataru, he was reading in Calcutta in his favorite room in maternal uncle's place. There, while reading, because he was preparing for law examination, he was seized with a kind of fright. And just then, without closing the book, he ran something like at least it is something like, I should say, 7 to 8 kilometers. Like a madman, he ran to his guru who was in Kashipur garden house. And uh, on the way, one of his sandals went away. His, you see, he was running by the side of haystacks. So these things, you see, the straws were on his body. Like that, like a madman, he appeared before his guru. And Guru simply asked him that, would you not continue your study? He said that if I can get a medicine by which I can forget whatever I have studied, I would be very, you see, happy. Next day, that is 3rd January, he came to Sri Ramakrishna that all of your disciples are having some, you see, amount of peace. Only I am without peace. Sri Ramakrishna asked him, what do you want? He said that his goal was to be in Nirvikalpa Samadhi, and after 4 or 5 days would come back to take a little food and again become absorbed in that Samadhi. Sri Ramakrishna reprimanded him, saying that what a low idea you have before you. He said that I thought that you were like a great banyan under whose shade many people will come. And you are talking like this, and there is a higher state than Samadhi. That is your destiny. You yourself sing those lines of Zafar, Jo kuch hai tu hi hai. Whatever exists is you, O God. That means seeing God with open eyes. This is your destiny. But anyhow, Ramakrishna understood, you see, Naren's mind, and through his grace, he could enter into the Nirvikalpa Samadhi very soon, for which event he would be grateful throughout his life. In many of his compositions, he mentions this. You see, in the long poem, of which the title is I Want to Sing a Song for You, he talks about it. When all the modifications of mind are focused due to your grace, he says there. In the Vespar song of the order which he himself composed, he says, Nirodhana Samahita Mana Nirakita Bukripa. Due to your grace, I see my mind in Samadhi. So, you see, he was very, very grateful because he understood that without his grace, he was unable to enter into this. So that is and at that time, though Naren was a very sensitive man, sensitive to the sense, to the misery of the people, you see, he had a very compassionate heart. Yet, due to the emergence of monastic ideals in him, you see, he became, you see, totally a little outwardly cruel to his own family, who had pecuniary difficulties. Later on, you see, when he would be in America, the Diwan of the Khetri state visited his family in Calcutta and wrote to him that it seemed to him that he was very cruel. Vivekananda replies that he thought over the whole question, and he thought like this: what if a mother and 2 brothers die? That is the maximum, the catastrophe that would happen. On the other hand, God has incarnated himself, and without my entering into sannyasa, much of this divine, much of this, your significance of this divine incarnation will be lost to humanity. So I decided that way. So if you, that means out of compassion for the whole humanity, he was ready to forget his own family. So he said that if you study my life comprehensively, you will not be able to say that I am cruel. So that is, you see, his mind, this compassion in his mind is there. Now, what was his first duty after the passing away of Sri Ramakrishna? Sri Ramakrishna asked him to take the leadership in assembling his followers, monastic followers. So that he was doing, you see, earnestly. You see. We find him doing earnestly in this your mott, which is called Baranagar mott. In those days, which is a, you see, this in a dilapidated house they were living, and intense spiritual practice they were doing. And Shashi Maharaj, Swami Ramakrishna, he was serving Sri Ramakrishna the regular puja, and also looking to the, you say, minimum bare needs of the brother disciples, so that they would not go hungry. Now, this was going on, and then like normal, you see, your monks, when they're too much full of monastic ideals, they want to be alone. You see, so he left your mott and visited the holy places of Hinduism. Mostly they are in Uttar Pradesh and Uttarakhand, you see. And in this, your time, it was in January 1819 that he came to Ghazipur in Uttar Pradesh and met Pauhari Baba, another great saint. He was charmed by Pauhari Baba, and he thought that Ramakrishna had already, you see, gone into the state of what they called nirvana. You see, that means he would not appear before his disciples. So he was seeking, you see, to become a disciple of Pauhari Baba. Pauhari Baba finally agreed, and in early morning, when he was supposed to go to Pauhari Baba to have mantra from him, Sri Ramakrishna appeared to him. You see, appeared to him, he was looking at him. You see, he himself describes it in his poem, I want to sing a song for you. You see, it happened. But he did not give up his resolution. So for the time being, he did not go to Pauhari Baba. He again and again he was trying. And every time this was happening, Ramakrishna would appear. So finally, he gave up the idea, thinking that it would not be, you see, very good for him when this is happening. And that year itself, I am talking about 1890, two of the great disciples of your Sri Ramakrishna, both of them were his suppliers. That means suppliers of his needs, you see. They used to bring food, etc., you see, to Dakshineshwar. One was Balaram Bose, another was Surendranath Mitra. Both of them passed away in the first half of 1890. And Naren also, due to his your constant travel, etc., was a little sick. So he returned to Calcutta and to also oversee how the monastery was going on. Again, he felt an urge. Again, he felt an urge to go out and live alone. Because he felt that, you see, his guru had said many things about him, but he was not finding that, you see, those things. His guru said that if the spiritual energy manifested by Keshav Chandra Sen be taken as a unit, then he has 18 such, you see, things. That means his power is 18 times more than that of Keshav Chandra Sen, you see. So he had also said, not only said, he wrote it on a piece of paper, Sri Ramakrishna, that Naren will become a teacher of humanity. When he will be a distant land, he will give a clarion call. You see, he wrote on a piece of paper. All these things were, you see, not visible, any signs of this thing. So he decided to go on tapasya. But, you see, this was another greatness of Swami Vivekananda. Before taking any major decision in life, he used to go to Sarada Devi, or used to seek her permission. So he went to Sarada Devi and she gave the permission. But he told Swami Akhandananda Gangadhar that, look here, Naren is our crest jewel. So you know all the paths and by lanes on the Himalayas. So you please look after Naren and see that he does not starve, etc. So with Akhandananda, he went out. And he said, you see, Swamiji said that if I become a real man, I shall come to you again. Otherwise, this is our last meeting. You see, Sarada Devi blessed Naren, saying that we will fulfill the prophecy of your guru, we will become great. You see, so she blessed. Now, in 18 living, so with Saradavi's permission, he became an itinerant monk again. Now, during this journey, one of the greatest things that would happen to him, his great meditation at a place called Kakri Ghat near Almora, where he could reconcile his Vedanta with his great compassion. You see. And not only that, immediately after this, your intuition, he was catapulted into another stage. he was no longer a spiritual aspirant, he became a world teacher. Because this intuition, you see, engraved in his mind the truth of Sarvang Kalidang Brahma. Earlier, many years before, he had this Aham Brahmasmi. Now Sarvang Kalidang Brahma. All this manifested universe, this is also Brahman. So thereby, you see, there is when you accept this, you have a large scope for your feeling for human beings. I mean compassion, you see. As Buddha said, you see, Matha Jataniyang Puttam, etc. So like that, you see, as like the mother's heart you bring to this world, that in regard of every soul. So that he got here, you see, this is a tremendous thing in his life, because he himself said that to Akhandananda-ji, under this tree, one of the greatest problems of my life has been solved. Now, there, you see, we know that by next year, 1891, he had already synthesized in his mind the message he would give to the world. Because one day he was talking to one of his brother disciples, and the brother disciples took note. From that we find that the germs of his teachings are already there. That means his message to the world was already ready in his mind. You see, the great message. That was 1892. You see, I have said that already he had become a world teacher, no longer is just a spiritual aspirant. Now, but still, something was not clear to him. He was not clear about his mission. What is exactly his mission in life? You see, how, you see, the Guru said that he would be a teacher of humanity. How it would happen? You see. So he was not clear. But one thing was in his mind, that since Sarvang Kalidang Brahma, so the first manifestation of this Sarvang Kalidang, all this universe, is his own native land. His own native land, he must know this native land very, very closely and clearly. In the battlefield of Kurukshetra, we read in the Mahabharata, Krishna says to Arjuna, I have already killed your enemies. You become just the apparent instrument. But in this case, in the case of Narayan, his actions would be on the stage of the world. That stage of the world was not visible yet. But he had discovered, you see, already something about his country. Now he wanted to know it intimately. He remembered that this is the land where Atman and Brahman, identity of this, has been realized by so many souls in the past. This is the land where different branches of knowledge and philosophy were disseminated a long time past. You see, I mean the land from Gandhara, the eastern Afghanistan, to the present day Punjab, you see. So many great souls and scholars appeared in the past. Yet, this is the land where the plundering by the foreigners and the mandatory cultivation of indigo had sapped the energy of the people, you see. They are becoming very, very poor because of the, as one of the Britishers himself wrote in the 19th century, all that was there in the valley of the Ganges, that was then pumped to the valley of the Thames River. You see, so that is, see, that systematic plundering. The Britishers were not killing people in the name of religion, but they were exploiting the country too much. So he saw it in 1891 January. He left his brother disciples, you see, because there was a great congregation in Mirat. You see, at one time 7 brothers happened to meet there. Now he left them all, that he must be alone. He came to Delhi, from Delhi to Rajputana, from there to Alwar in Gujarat, met the ruler Mangal Singh, who was a highly anglicized king of India. And he used to ridicule this idol worship, this so-called idol worship. And there, you see, to convince him, the Mangal Singh, Swamiji looked at one of the big portraits of the king hanging on the wall. He asked your officials of the kingdom to bring it down to him. And when they brought it down, he asked them to spit upon it. They were scandalized what the Swami was saying. So he looked at Mangal Singh and said that, look here, you are not in this picture, you see, but still, since it is an emblem of yours, your officials, they're not doing it. Similarly, you see, the idols are the emblems through which the thing which is beyond the senses, they are grasped by human beings, and worship is offered. Worship is not offered to a piece of wood or piece of clay. You see, worship is offered to God himself. The mantras themselves suggest this, you see. So then, you see, understood this is a great thing to, because Sri Ramakrishna, in a way, his life was a great your refusal of the second commandment of the 10 commandments, that you must not bow down before any representation of God. You see, again and again he showed that the representation of God becomes divinely animated through sincere worship. So here, you see, it is a great event in the life of Vivekananda that he, you see, made him understand these things. But he also was keen on studying. His studying, you see, he came to Jaipur after this Alwar, where this Ashtadhyayi of Panini and his commentary by Patanjali, he studied under a scholar, which is a very difficult text, you see. So uh, 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 Panini was most probably from the Gandhar region, the modern Afghanistan, you see. Anyhow, then he came to Mount Abu, where he met his future disciple, Maharaja Ajit Singh of Khetri. He went to Ahmedabad, where he spent some time to study Islamic and Jain cultures. And then he went to Junagadh, where he met the Diwan, that means the Prime Minister of the princely state, Mr. Desai. He passed 9 months in Porbandar because he got the beautiful library of the Diwan to study there. He was studying philosophy. He was studying also Sanskrit. He was also studying French language. French language he used not to give lecture because his pronunciation was never perfected. In those days, audios were not there, but he knew basic French language. So then he came from there to Mumbai, where he met the greatest political leader of India, Tilak. He was in Tilak's house for a few days. From there, he went to Bangalore, where he met the Diwan, Mr. Iyer, who introduced him to the Maharaja of Mysore. And the Maharaja, in his turn, introduced him to the Diwan of Tibankar Cochin, the modern Kerala. In Christmas Eve, 1892, he was in Kanyakumari. Again, a very dramatic thing, you see. One day after worshipping the mother at the Kanyakumari temple, he had a tremendous desire to swim across the sea to the nearest island, which was a barren island, totally barren island. He swam across there because he could not pay for the ferry. He went there and sat in meditation. It was the Christmas week of 1892. 3 days in meditation, without food, without rest. You see, he was in meditation there. And there, he, in this profound meditation, he found his way. He found his way. Say, he was thinking that since India was so much poor, and India must be raised, because if India dies, then the whole world will be suffering, because much of the spiritual knowledge which was manifested here would also, go away from the humanity, and humanity will, it will take millions of years for humanity to recover all these things again. So India must be raised, and how to raise? He thought about give and take. You see, he should go to the West to earn some money, and in return, he should give India's spiritual knowledge to the West, because he saw that the religion in the East, they built up a civilization, but which was not complete. The civilization of the West, they have you see, something, but it is not also your, because you see, in Detroit, you'd say in 1894, Christians, go back to Christ. Go back to the one who did not know where to lay his head. You see, it is better to live in rags with Christ than to live without him in palaces. You see. So he thought, he saw that West was after material things, totally ignoring the spirituality. You see. In fact, in your this Protestant religion, from the very beginning, Protestant religion did a great service to humanity because it protested against the vices of the Vatican. But in doing so, they overdid certain things. They you know, took away the monastic ideals. If you take away monastic ideals, how can you call you Christian? You see, you see, Christ was 100% a monk. You see, 100% a monk, and it is very evident from the Bible. You see, so that part of his, they have kept his ideal of this. They talk about it, the Good Samaritan. You see. They talk about it, but the other half of this, that he was, you see, he was a man of renunciation and he preached renunciation. This part is, see, somewhat hidden in the Protestant movement, and from which much of the malaise in the Western world is coming today. Because though they are minorities, the Protestants, they are the leaders of the Western world. Yes. Now, I am there he met, after this Kanyakumari, he met the local king, the king of Madurai, who gave him your assurance of his health for his journey to the West, but this promise he didn't never kept. You see, this is one of the, you see, Bhaskar Setupati did not keep his promise. When he came to Madras and he met this man from Chikmagalur in Karnataka who was settled in Madras, I am talking about this disciple of, lay disciple of Swami Vivekananda, who impressed upon him the idea that, you see, he was himself, this man was seeking for a leader who would represent Hinduism in the Parliament of Religions. So he found, when he met Vivekananda, he found that he was the fittest man. So he began to raise money, and 500 rupees was raised in Madras itself. But Swami Vivekananda said that it was my plan to go to the West. I have not got yet the divine command. The Maharaja of, who is called Nizam of Hyderabad, also wanted to give him help. He gave the same reply, that I have not yet got the command from above. You see. So you see, this money, 500 rupees, was redistributed among the poor of Madras. You see. Then, you see, to become sure that there is a divine will behind this, he had some vision that on the sea, Ramakrishna is walking and was beckoning to him to follow. But to become sure, he wrote a letter to Sarada Devi, and Swami Saradananda went to Sarada Devi with this letter, and Sarada Devi's blessings came. So then he made up his mind that when Sarada Devi was blessing, then there is a divine will. And main help came from the Maharaja of Khetri. So he went to Khetri, and from there finally to Mumbai to take the boat. So, and he will take the boat on 31st May. In this whole divine drama, which begins from Rashmani's your installation of the temple complex at Dakshineshwar, to Ramakrishna, to Vivekananda, etc. So this is clear 38 years. 31st May 1855, the temple was consecrated, and Swami Vivekananda started his journey on 31st May 1893. So this is clear 38 years, say, in this divine drama we find. Now, what was the most important thing in this part of his life? You see, most important thing was, you see, that himself was prepared for this. You see, his message, you see, his study of Western philosophy, of Eastern philosophies, of science as far as it was known, you see, in those days, was complete. He had met great teachers in your all parts of India, including the famous your Saint Trilanga Swami. You see, he had met many your scholars, religious scholars. He had met princes. He had met ordinary people. You see, most ordinary people, saw their lives, etc., etc. So he had a comprehensive idea of what is India, what is religion, and personally he was completely equipped with this transcendental knowledge of two kinds, Aham Brahmasmi and Sarvam Kalvidam Brahma. That means it is not only the great teachers had it, you see. The Upanishadic rishis had this transcendental knowledge, but Buddha is prominent because he was not simply a man who had got bodhi. He had tremendous karuna, compassion. So Swamiji had a Buddha-like heart, and he had the brain of Shankara also, So there's a combination of Shankara's brain and Buddha's heart in him already. He told one of his brother disciples, he said that I do not know what dharma is, but my heart has expanded tremendously. You see, this is possible. You see, this happened to Buddha himself. You see, so that was the great thing in his life up to this period. Now, along with this, he was searching how to help his country. So the boat went, you see, from Ceylon, etc., you see, to China and Japan, And from there he sailed to Vancouver to touch the soil of the West. You see. So from there, Vancouver, he journeyed by railway. He went to Winnipeg and all these places and entered into the United States. You see. United States, when he came to Chicago, he learned two things: that he would not be allowed to speak in the parliament because he was not representing anyone. That is number one. Number two, that Chicago was a costly city and he had little money with him. So people advised him to go to a more, a modest city, so Boston. So he was journeying to Boston. In the train, you see, he met a lady who was a kind of writer and who looked at Swamiji. And 10 years back, an Italian came to USA and he was playing in the role of Othello. So this Othello's figure, you see, he saw in the turbaned Swami, in this lady, and became attracted to him and asked him where was he going and what was his mission, etc. Swamiji explained his difficulty, that he had no, you see, later representation from any organized religion. So he cannot speak at the parliament. The lady said that, you see, I have a house in the suburban area of your Boston, and there a great professor of the Harvard University lives, and he may help you. So thereby Swamiji went there. You see, it is all, you see, the obstacles are there, but you see, since it's a divine play, God also helps. You see. So Swamiji went there, met this professor, and he wrote a letter to the president of the Parliament of Religions, saying that to ask Swamiji his right to teach is like asking the sun its right to shine. He added that he was more learned than all the professors of his university combined, you see. So it is such a strong letter, you see, he had no fear then of, it was this village, Anisquam. In this Anisquam, he gave a small talk to the people around where he said that the Western people have harmed so much the Asiatic people that he said in his words, you may not believe in the vengeance of God, but do believe in the vengeance of history. Huns will overrun Europe, he said. And there's a shudder in this hall. They said when it would happen. Swamiji looked at the upwards and said, maybe in 1,000 years. You see, already we are seeing the first signs of Huns overtaking the whole world, you see, in commerce, etc. So that was one of the, you see, then he would come very soon to this, he went to, armed with this later, he went to Chicago again, and then he had lost in the meantime during the train journey his address, and he didn't know where to go. And most people were not speaking your English there. They were German settlers, refugees from Germany. So they saw this bizarre man, you see, with this turban, etc. And no restaurant, no eating place was, you see, they're banging their doors in front of him. Finally, you see, he walked and there was a heavy load of books with him, very heavy load. He became exhausted. Finally, on the steps of a church, he sat down and most probably was praying. Opposite that church, you see, there's a house from where a lady came and asked him, "Sir, are you a delegate to the Parliament of Religions?" He said, "Yes, but I have lost my address and I do not know where to go." The lady invited Swamiji to her house and gave him food and rest, and he escorted him to this place. So from there, he's entering on the stage of the world. He was tremendously poor at that time. He wrote a letter to Alasinga Perumal, this man who helped him, you see, to this man from Chikmagalur. So he wrote to him about some help. This letter would take, you see, for coming and raising money and sending, I think some $200 were sent in those days. It took 2 months. By that time, Swamiji would become world famous and he had no need of money, you see. But it was such a poor state, you see, that he didn't know how to manage himself in the next few days. Just before the Parliament of Religions, it was happening like that, you see. But everything eased out soon. So he would enter into another stage of life and, you see, he would give his messages. So you see, so this part I am closing here. If you have any questions, you can raise your questions. If anything was not clear.
So I may ask you one question.
Yes.
So after Swamiji has left Swami Akhandananda in the hills of Himalaya, he has traveled alone down to Kanyakumari.
Yes.
So that travel, was it mainly because he wanted to establish his own future and the plan what he's going to do?
No, he saw that, you see, living in contact with a brother disciple is not total isolation. For augmenting your spirituality, you see, as the great saint of Spain said already, it is the flight of the alone to the alone. You must not be with anyone, you see. He wanted complete isolation, you see. And Sri Ramakrishna used to talk about Nirjana Vasa for the householders, that occasionally they should go in a solitary place. For monks, this is much more necessary. So that was the main thing. And apart from that, he wanted to also, you say, see things and have the freedom of meditation, you see, as and when he liked.
So there is one question who has come in.
Yes.
From Ronak. Pranam Maharaj, do you think Swamiji had some unaccomplished spiritual goals which he wanted to get from Pahuari Baba?
Unwanted means, you see, he remembered that Ramakrishna had said so many things about him, but none of these things were visible. That is number one. And as I have told you already, that he thought that Ramakrishna had already entered into nirvana. He would not appear before the disciples. So he thought of having a help from another person, you see. So he was impressed by the life of Pahari Baba. So that is it.
Yeah. Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Yeah. Swamiji, namaskar.
Yes.
See, in the way, in the story of Vivekananda, I see that there were three major instances of spiritual experience. The first one was the samadhi that Ramakrishna gave him.
Yes. Yes.
The second experience, as I understood, is when he went to Himalayas and under the tree, he had that experience.
Yes, near Almora, I think the place is called Kakri Ghat.
Correct. And then the third one I thought was Vivekananda Rock, which has become famous now. But
Yes.
where he was sitting there, and
Yes.
These three events finally had culminated in shaping the monk, that is Vivekananda. From a monk, he has become a teacher.
Yes. Yes.
In this thing, perhaps it was the divine intention of Ramakrishna Paramahamsa that he had to first realize what is the, while realizing the Brahmakal, Samadhi and experiencing the God, but he has to also experience the way the world is actually behaving, and
Yes,
feel the
exactly.
poverty. That is also a part of the
Yes,
spiritual experience.
Yes. And the poverty of his family, etc., etc., this was also a part of it, because it augmented his feeling for the miserable, you see. He was tremendously, you see, you see, when he used to think about the poor, he used to say, he said that even in Belur Math, he said that I would like to see that, you see, that the whole Ganges becomes, you see, turbid because of, you see, so much of water from the boiled rice is being poured, and this boiled rice is being served to the poor, you see. That was his kind of vision in him, you see. He was always thinking about the poor, you see. When your man from central India came to him to have some donation for the protection of the cows, Vivekananda asked him, the government's report is that the 9 lakh people have passed away in the starvation in Madhya Pradesh. What are you doing about this? You see. He was very much, you see, and finally his mind was so much tuned to the suffering of humanity everywhere that once Swami Vivekananda in Belur Math, he was, Swami Vivekananda was in a room. You see, those of you who have visited Belur Math know it, this room. And he was in a nearby place, Swami Vivekananda. He heard some noise in Swamiji's room. So he entered in the middle of the night in Swamiji's room and asked him, Swamiji, are you well? Are you sleeping well? Swamiji replied, I was sleeping well, but in a distant land, many people are in difficulty just at this moment. So that has given me agani. And Vivekananda note the time when Swamiji was saying it. Next day he saw that in the Pacific Islands there had been a big eruption, volcanic eruption, just at that time. You see, so he was so much tuned to the misery of humanity.
There is one more question which has come in, Swamiji.
Yes.
So the question is, Maharaj, the way Swamiji would look for the divine command before acting, is it possible for ordinary humans like us to seek divine command before acting on difficult subjects?
In fact, divine command is not available to ordinary persons. What ordinary persons should do, they should seek divine blessing and act in a dharmic way. Divine blessings do not come to a person who is acting in the adharmic way. You must act in the dharmic way and seek divine blessing. But at the same time, you see, you should try to curb your gross desires. You see, that is the thing.
Okay, Swamiji, I think we can go to the guided meditation.
Yes.
I think we have some 15 minutes left if you want to keep the schedule.
Yes. So I would propose that, you see, in sometime in 1884, after the passing away of Naren's father, Mr. Datta, Naren did not find anything, you see, any employment, and the family was suffering too much. So finally, he sought the help of Ramakrishna. He came to Ramakrishna that you must pray for the material welfare of my family. It is too much for me to bear. Sri Ramakrishna replied that I have never uttered such a prayer to the Divine Mother. But today is your Tuesday, a day auspicious for the worship of the Divine Mother. You go to the temple yourself and ask. And whatever you ask for, it will be given to you. So thrice he went. You see, one after. First time he went, and you see, then remember Sri Ramakrishna's teachings that coming to a king, one does not ask for a pumpkin. So he was ashamed and he came back. You see. So second time, you see, he was, you see, he went there and forgot everything, and you see. So Sri Ramakrishna sent him the third time. And this time also, he was unable to say anything. He finally prayed for jnana and bhakti, you see, viveka and vairagya, etc. So he returned to Sri Ramakrishna and said that he must do something for him. Ramakrishna replied that I sent you 3 times, you could not utter these things, prayer. So material prosperity is not your lot. But by the grace of the Divine Mother, your the bare necessities of the family would be provided for by the Divine Mother, you see. So then he was very happy. He asked him to teach him a song. So Ramakrishna taught him Matang Hitara, etc. And the whole night he was singing this song, and in the early morning he fell asleep in Dakshina. So this is our first meditation. Our next theme would be this 2nd January, 3rd January of 1886. And Naren, as a young man, you see, running bare-bodied from his home in Calcutta to the suburban area, Kashipur Garden House, to Sri Ramakrishna. And the next day, his appeal for almost your uninterrupted samadhi. So this is our second theme. Our next theme will be this meditation on the rock, which is now called Vivekananda rock. I say you may add a theme to the meditation, and that first he prayed in the temple of Kanyakumarika, and then he went there, and a man saw him swimming to this place. At the end of this first day, this man went with a boat with a little rice and coconut, gratings to feed him. And Swamiji was annoyed and asked him not to disturb him at all, you see. So the man went back. Thank you all for your attention.